Hello and welcome to this week's YouTube video. Today I'm going to show you how I painted this black cat. I will be using my usual palette of 7 colours. Please see the item description for the full details. I will, however, be adding raw umber to this palette, so I'm going to show you how I would use this colour in this palette. So let's get straight on with the painting, and I will speak about what I am doing as we go along. The painting time of this video is 25 minutes. I have speeded it up slightly as I didn't want it to be too long. However, I think it is still very clear what I am doing. I should probably also say it is quite hard to talk non-stop for 25 minutes. I find it hard anyway, so there may be moments in this video where I go quiet. Please don't adjust your volume, I'm just not speaking. Unfortunately, there isn't just one method of painting a black animal that will give you perfect results every time. How I paint it depends upon the light in the reference photo. However, often black cats have an underlying red-brown to their fur, and you can clearly see it in the reference photos. When this brown is apparent, I will always paint the animal in this way by adding raw umber to my palette. I find this method usually gives me the result I want pretty quickly without much hassle. This is the method I'm going to show you today. I am using the raw umber as a sort of underpainting for the first layer. I am watering it down with gamsol, mineral spirits, so that it's very transparent. I have put a very light wash of raw sienna and gamsol on my oil painting paper before I start. If you want to know the brand of paper I used, then have a look in the item description. I start with the eyes and just cover my paper quickly with the shape of the cat. I am concentrating on painting shapes at this point. If you struggle to see the shapes, then squint down and this will help simplify them for you. For areas where I want a bit more definition, for example the cat's nose and chin, I use less gamsol with the raw umber. Remember that even though the cat is black, there will be value changes in its fur. So the shadows will be your deepest blacks, then you will have your mid blacks, and then your lighter blacks where the light is hitting it. I am using my raw umber in this way, but using the transparency to mimic this. So I'll have a more opaque raw umber for my darkest areas through to a more transparent raw umber for my lighter areas. This is helping me to establish my values. Because I want my colours to be as fresh as possible, I am then doing the same thing with the background but trying to select the correct colours. Because the paint is very transparent, I don't have to worry about it being super correct. I am aiming for a general value and general colour that I can adjust later on in the painting. The cat is sitting on a sofa, so I am just trying to get a sense of the pattern of the fabric without being too detailed. I am being quite rough and quick with how I apply the paint at this stage. It is easier to start loose and then tighten up than to start tight and loosen up. That's the first layer of this painting done. I will lay it under a radiator and then have another go at it the next day. Because the paint is so thin, it usually dries very quickly. On the second layer, I have started with the background first. This is because I want to give my cat some context of where it is. I don't always do it this way around, it depends on the reference photo. As there is no particular feature jumping out at me regarding the cat, it makes sense to start with the background first. Plus, this is a small painting, it's only 8 by 8 inches, so the features of the cat are small. It's more important to get that cat looking like it's sat on that sofa. It's still very rough and sketchy. I just want to suggest that background, and I'm using a combination of both dry and wet brushwork. If you have any old brushes lying around, these usually work really well for dry brushwork. I quite like the Art Master ones. I've mixed up my yellow ochre light with my cad red to give me an orange. I am now using this on the edges of my cat, basically anywhere where the brown fur is really obvious to me. The paint is still pretty transparent and I'm still using my gamsol to thin it. When I move on to the main body of the cat, I have mixed this orange into my raw umber. I'm using dry brushwork here again to lay the paint. I am concentrating on laying this brown in the dark areas of my cat. I use my smallest round brush for the details of the eyes, and I've mixed up a black plus alizarin crimson. I want my black to have warmth. The addition of all this red, brown and orange is to basically give my black cat warmth in his darkest areas. So that's my second layer done, and it goes back under the radiator to dry before I have another go at it the next day. I've moved on to my darkest darks now, and this is the same mix of alizarin crimson plus black. I am not using gamsol to thin my paint anymore, but have moved on to linseed oil. I am only using a small amount to give a bit of fluidity to my paint. I am painting my darkest darks first. As I move on to the mid-blacks in the face, I am changing value, so going lighter and also changing temperature. Imagine a scale of 1 to 10. Your darkest areas are a 10. This would be perhaps an 8 out of 10. So as I move to these mid-tone black areas, I want to change my temperature. A change in temperature is going to help me to create a sense of form. You can, if you want, just take your black and add a bit of white to it. This will give you both the temperature and also value change that you need, and it will work well. I tend to mix in a bit of raw umber too, as I want my colours to be more harmonious. As I have used raw umber in the main body already, adding it to the midtones will help create a more harmonious painting. I'm just switching between my warm dark black and my cool mid black depending upon what I am seeing in my reference photo. Remember that the more small brush work you do, the more this will tighten up your painting. So if you want a looser painting, try and keep your smallest brushes to a minimum. I'm just trying to get the face correct before I move on to the body. For the eye colour, I have made a green using yellow ochre light and ultramarine deep. I have then lightened with white plus yellow ochre light to get the correct value. The eyes are more of a yellow green than a blue green in this painting. I am making my darkest black as dark as possible, but still with the inclusion of alizarin crimson. It can go very dark even with the red added to it, but it really does give you that lovely glossy black that you see in a black cat's fur, especially when it is laid next to something cooler in temperature. The inside of that ear is raw umber plus a bit of white for the lighter areas. In the photo I am looking at, the inside of the cat's ear is not warmer than the glossy black surrounding it. Always look at everything in relation to what is next to it. I am not quite sure why I left that nose for so long before painting in the correct value. There is no real reason for that. Sometimes I can leave an area of a painting alone for no other reason than it is not affecting how I am viewing my efforts so far. I think this was the case here. Other times, not filling in an area can significantly affect the overall effect of your values, temperature and colour. So you need to judge it on every single painting and block in what is important to you. Now I feel I am just fiddling on the fine details before I move on to that body. Watching this back, I'd probably just like to tell myself to get stuck into that main body of the cat. This is one of my bad habits really. I can get sucked into detail when it's not really necessary. I'm putting in the highlights and details around those eyes. Again, you could leave this until the end if you want. Sometimes I like to have a real anchor point that the painting can grow around. In this painting, my anchor point was the face. The The anchor point is also usually my area of interest, so I'll have the most detail in this area. It will have my tightest brushwork. When putting the highlights in the eyes, remember that this is often the area of the painting where you have the greatest contrast. So here I am laying white against black. Nowhere else in this painting do I lay pure white against pure black. This then becomes my area of biggest contrast, which helps direct your eyes there. This is then coupled with my area where my painting is the tightest, which again helps focus the viewer's attention on my cat's face. Everything else in the painting should really just be there to support this area, not to detract. You'll soon see how quickly I paint the body and how little detail I add to my brushwork. Moving on to the body then, this can be painted quickly and loosely. This will then add contrast to the tightness of the face and help direct the viewer's eye to where I want them to look. I am using my alizarin crimson and black for my darkest area again. I am also using one of my Art Master old brushes. I want a lot of dry brushwork in this area as it adds a really lovely texture to the painting that contrasts with the highly rendered face. I am using my paint in various transparencies because even though the cat is black, it still has noticeable markings on its coat. I am slightly varying my temperatures here too, between warm and cool. For my cooler areas, I am adding white to my raw umber and not my black. White plus raw umber gives me enough of a temperature shift against that black plus alizarin crimson. If I need to warm up my raw umber, I add a little of my orange mix, that is yellow ochre light plus cad red. By flicking my brush strokes in a loose, quick manner, it adds looseness and movement to my cat. Don't forget about your edges too. I am using my orange too as a bridging colour to transition from my cat to its background. This will help prevent the effect of a cat not integrated into its background. You can also pull your edges into your background too and sort of lose them. Lost edges can really help add a sense of mystery to your painting. I'm being very loose and quick with the cat's chest and stomach area. If I were to paint this in a tight way, it would detract from the face area. It is not really important to our understanding of this painting. I could have left it even more unfinished than I did and it would have still worked. However, as this was a commission, there is a limit to how unfinished I can make something. I was using my raw umber with a little orange plus a tiny amount of linseed oil. It is still predominantly dry brushwork and the paint is very transparent. I will then go back over this with thicker paint, but I will not cover every area as I like my paint to be thick and thin. It gives a really good texture to the paint and makes it far more interesting than if you put it all on thick or all on thin. Always aim for variety and contrast. It's the key to an interesting painting. For my cooler areas, I am adding white to my raw umber. I have placed some of this at the top of my cat's body and some at the bottom. So now I have my colour shift of cool, warm, cool. This creates a sense of form. For the blanket that the cat is lying on, I have added a tiny amount of alizarin crimson and ultramarine deep to some white to give me a cool purple. As my paper is covered with a yellowish wash, this complementary looks great against the warm yellow. Remember that yellow and purple are complementary colours, and when placed together they look great. I'm adjusting my edges and placing an orange as a bridge into my white. Now I have my cat fully painted, I can adjust where I am out on my background or where it just needs a bit more work. I need just enough information that it helps describe what the cat is sat on, but not too much that it detracts from my cat. If in doubt, less is more. And that is it. Here is the finished painting. I hope you have found today's video useful. Please like and subscribe if you can, and check out my website sarahhallidayart.com, where you will see examples of my work and also details of online classes that I run. Thank you for watching, and see you for the next one.